An army has always been a nation's backbone. Well, sure, the future might look different with AI drones and killing robots taking over the battlefield, but for now and for most of history, that statement holds true. Ever since humans started claiming land and drawing borders, they've relied on military strength to protect it. That's why the history of warfare runs so deep and its traces are scattered across the globe. In this video, we're taking you on a journey through some of the most astonishing and unexpected ancient military discoveries ever uncovered on Earth. Number 15. The Twin Sisters Cannons. When the Battle of San Jacinto erupted on April 21, 1836, it took just 18 minutes for Texas forces to secure victory, and 2 cannons helped start it all. Nicknamed the Twin Sisters, these 6-pounders were donated by the citizens of Cincinnati and delivered by Dr. Charles Rice, whose twin daughters gave the weapons their name. They fired the opening volley that threw the Mexican camp into chaos. It was a pivotal moment that tipped the battle in Texas's favor and cemented the cannons' legendary status. But after the battle, the cannons vanished. They appeared briefly at Sam Houston's presidential inauguration, then slipped back into mystery. Some say they were handed over to the U.S. Army. Others believe they were hidden during the Civil War to keep them from Union forces. No confirmed trace of them has ever surfaced since. Their last rumored sighting was in Houston, but that too faded. Today, the Twin Sisters are more than artillery. They're part of Texas folklore wrapped in smoke, fire, and unanswered questions. Number 14. The massive earthworks of Benin. In what's now southern Nigeria, the Kingdom of Benin built something the world still struggles to wrap its head around: the Benin Walls. These weren't decorative. They were huge earthworks, stretching for thousands of miles, dug and shaped by hand centuries before modern machinery. Starting around the 13th century under Oba Ogola, the kingdom began constructing moats and raised walls to defend Benin City. Over time, the system grew so vast that by the time Europeans arrived, it had become one of the largest man-made structures in existence. The Guinness Book of Records once called it the world's longest earthwork built before machines. What's left of it still shows the engineering brilliance of the time. Benin City wasn't just protected, it was organized with drainage systems, planned roads, and city zones. But in 1897, British forces stormed the city, burned it down, and looted what they could, including the famous Benin bronzes. The walls stand as a reminder not just of what was built, but what was nearly erased. Number 13. Project Babylon. In the late 1980s, Saddam Hussein poured resources into an unusual idea: building superguns capable of launching payloads into orbit. The project was called Babylon, and the engineering behind it came from Gerald Bull, a Canadian weapons expert who had been experimenting with similar tech since the 60s. The plan included 2 versions: Baby Babylon, a test model mounted horizontally, and Big Babylon, an enormous barrel stretching over 500 feet, intended to shoot satellites into space. But it wasn't just about science. There were obvious military implications. Before much progress could be made, Bull was assassinated in 1990, and international pressure brought the entire project to a halt. Parts of the gun were seized in transit across Europe, and the rest were dismantled in Iraq after the Gulf War. Even now, it's unclear just how far they got. What's left are scattered fragments, abandoned blueprints, and a story that sounds more like a Cold War thriller than reality, proof that ambition, when mixed with politics, can be just as dangerous as any weapon. What do you think about this weapon? Let us know. Number 12. The mysterious crossbow crank of Nuremberg. Well, honestly, at first glance it looks like a tool from a medieval workshop: metal, intricate, and clearly well crafted. But the object held at the Met Museum in New York is far more than a curiosity. It's a cranked crossbow windler, or craniquin, dated around 1727 and believed to have noble origins. Carved into the frame are the initials CLR, topped with a crown, suggesting someone of high status once owned it, though their exact identity is still a mystery. The craftsmanship points to a German origin, likely from the Nuremberg region. Steel forms the body of the device, but other materials like gold, copper, alloy, leather, and bullhorn were added, some for function, others perhaps symbolic. The bullhorn in particular stands out as unusual, hinting at a personal connection or a deeper meaning. This wasn't a battlefield tool, it was a status symbol, a mechanical jewel meant to accompany an elite crossbow. It's rare, it's ornate, and after all this time it's still refusing to give up all its secrets. Number 11. The Peenemünde rocket base. This thing was more than a lab. It was a launch pad for a future no one was ready for. Built on Germany's Baltic coast in the 1930s, it became the center for Nazi rocket development. It's where Wernher von Braun and his team created the V-2 rocket, the world's first long-range ballistic missile. These rockets were fired at Allied cities with terrifying force, but what's chilling is how advanced the technology was, too advanced for its time. The base itself was enormous. Rail lines, ports, an airport, and an entire city of workers. But none of it could exist without the dark truth behind its success. Slave labor from concentration camps built the rockets and the site. Thousands died assembling the machines that would be used to kill thousands more. After the war, the Allies bombed the facility, and Russian troops eventually overran it. Von Braun surrendered to U.S. forces and was brought to America under Operation Paperclip. There he helped NASA build rockets for the Apollo program. It's a legacy built on contradiction, brilliant science born from brutal means. Number 10. The Crusader Sith sword found underwater. In 2021, a diver named Shlomi Katzin headed into the sea near Haifa, hoping for a relaxing swim, and surfaced with history in his arms. While exploring the seabed, he spotted something massive and oddly shaped under layers of sand. It turned out to be a sword, ancient, heavy, and still intact after 900 years underwater. Experts believe the iron blade once belonged to a Crusader knight stationed at the nearby citadel of Etlit. Though coated in marine sediment and shell buildup, the sword measures nearly 5 feet long. Even cleaned, it would still be a massive weapon, the kind that took serious strength to wield. What makes the discovery remarkable is not just its preservation but how it was found, completely by accident, by a regular guy out for a swim. Katzin handed the sword over to archaeologists, and it's now being cleaned and studied. The blade may have rested in silence for centuries, but now it's telling stories again, stories of war, faith, and the men who carried it. Number 9. Tipu Sultan Sith's sword and pistol. In 2019, a couple in Berkshire stumbled onto something that should have been in a museum. During a routine home renovation, they opened a dusty attic box and pulled out a sword and pistol that clearly weren't ordinary antiques. Experts quickly confirmed that the pieces once belonged to Tipu Sultan, the powerful ruler of Mysore in southern India, who was defeated in 1799 by the British under the Duke of Wellington. The items were war trophies taken by Major Thomas Hart, one of Wellington's most trusted officers, and kept in his family for generations without anyone realizing their value. The sword and pistol are remarkably ornate, crafted for royalty, not just battle. They stayed hidden for over 200 years, forgotten by the descendants who inherited them. But when they were finally identified, they fetched a staggering $6 million from a museum. The weapons once carried by a king during his final stand ended up boxed away in an attic, only to re-emerge and claim the spotlight they were always meant to have. Number 8. The Enigma Machine. Back in 2019, divers cleaning up fishing nets off the coast of Gelting Bay, Germany, spotted something odd stuck in the seabed. At first, it looked like a busted typewriter. Nothing worth dragging up. But when someone with a sharper eye took a look, they realized it was a World War II Enigma machine. The real deal. It had spent decades underwater, corroded and cracked, but still recognizable. Most likely, it had been tossed off a German ship in the last stretch of the war to keep it from landing in Allied hands. What's wild is the secrecy behind it. German troops were still going to crazy lengths to protect these machines, not knowing that Alan Turing had already broken the code years earlier. That one machine is a snapshot of paranoia, desperation, and a war already turning against them. It's not just rusted metal. It's proof of how far people went to guard something that had already been exposed. Humans can do anything to protect the things they love. Number 7. The chemical weapon attack. It's easy to think of chemical warfare as a modern horror, but the idea of using poison in battle stretches far back. At Dura Europos in Syria, archaeologists uncovered evidence of what may be the earliest example of a chemical weapon attack, one that unfolded nearly 1,700 years ago. Roman soldiers had been stationed in a narrow tunnel beneath the fortress wall, trying to defend the position from Persian invaders. But the Persians had a grim trick up their sleeve. Using bellows, they pumped a toxic mix of bitumen and sulfur into the tunnel, creating a poisonous gas that would have knocked the Romans unconscious almost instantly. None of the 20 soldiers made it out. A single Persian body found nearby hints that the weapon was just as deadly to the attackers as it was to the defenders. The simplicity of the method, smoke, fire, and chemistry, makes it even more chilling. This wasn't a fluke, it was a plan, and a brutally effective one. Number 6. Vimy Ridge. The trenches at Vimy Ridge tell a story that goes far beyond mud and barbed wire. These winding channels carved into the northern French landscape were more than defensive lines, they were where soldiers lived, fought, and endured. Canada's forces arrived at Vimy in 1916 and expanded an already vast network of tunnels and trenches. These passageways, some stretching back to medieval times, allowed troops to move unseen, deliver supplies and launch attacks without exposing themselves to machine gun fire. During the Battle of Vimy Ridge in April 1917, that underground advantage paid off. Canadian troops stormed the ridge with precision, catching the German defenders off guard. Today, what remains of the trenches has been preserved. Walking through them, you feel how narrow survival was. The walls still bear the marks of boots, hands, and helmets. And while the mud has dried and the gunfire is gone, the silence is loud with memory. Vimy isn't just history, it's a place that shaped it. Number 5. Rochonvillers. Right by the France-Luxembourg border, Rochonvillers was built to be unbreakable. Part of the Maginot Line, it was full of underground tunnels, artillery points, and thick concrete, meant to hold back a German assault. But when war came in 1940, the Germans didn't go through the front door. They went around it, attacked from the rear, and tore into the fort with explosives. The French soldiers stationed there couldn't do much. They surrendered, and the place was turned into German barracks. After the war, it changed hands a few times, used by NATO, then the French army again. But since the late 90s, it's just been sitting there. Off limits, quiet, sealed up behind warning signs. A few guards keep people out, but the tunnels still stretch under the ground, cold and unused. This was supposed to be a fortress that stood strong. Instead, it became a footnote, proof that even the best-laid plans can collapse when the enemy doesn't follow the script. Number 4. The Viet Cong tunnels at Key. During the Vietnam War, American forces had superior weapons, helicopters, and air support, but the Viet Cong had the ground. Underneath the dense jungles near Kitchi, they dug miles of narrow tunnels, some stretching all the way to the outskirts of Saigon. These weren't crude holes, they had kitchens, infirmaries, command centers, and hidden storage. Soldiers lived, moved, and planned entire operations underground. The tunnels were small by design, too tight for most American troops to navigate. Entry points were camouflaged, air vents hidden, and traps rigged for anyone who found their way in. U.S. forces tried everything: flooding, gas, explosives, and sending in volunteers called tunnel rats. Still, most of the network stayed intact until the war ended. Today, parts of the tunnels are open to tourists, widened for visitors, but still claustrophobic. Standing in one, it's hard to imagine how people survived down there, let alone fought a war. But they did, and it worked. These tunnels weren't just clever, they were a key reason the war dragged on for so long. There was a reason. Alright guys, now let's talk about Number 3. The sunken airplanes. Beneath the waters of Kwajalein Atoll lies a surreal underwater scene, an airplane graveyard like no other. This site, just off the Marshall Islands, is home to over 100 World War II-era planes sitting quietly on the ocean floor without any humans inside. These weren't wrecks from battle. They were deliberately pushed off ships after the war ended, deemed unnecessary or too expensive to transport back. Today, they rest in eerie formation across the seabed, their bodies still largely intact despite the passing decades. Some are recognizable at a glance, their propellers frozen mid-motion, wings caked in coral. For divers, it's more than just a photo opportunity. It's a strange, somber time capsule. Records about these aircraft are scarce, and many of the planes can't be definitively traced to individual missions or squadrons. Still, they draw visitors from all over the world, curious to witness a fleet that never took off again. The ocean might have claimed them, but their stories linger, faded, submerged, and oddly peaceful. Number 2. The Hollow Nickel Spy Case. In 1953, a 14-year-old paperboy in Brooklyn handed over a nickel that didn't feel quite right. It popped open, and inside was a tiny piece of film covered in numbers. The coin ended up with the FBI, sparking one of the most unusual spy investigations of the Cold War. The hollow nickel was a KGB dead drop used to pass encrypted messages. For years, the message made no sense. It wasn't until 1957, when Soviet agent Rino Hayhanen defected, that the full picture came into focus. The coin had been meant for Rudolf Abel, a top KGB spy living under a false identity in New York. Abel was caught with cameras, maps, and other espionage gear, and was eventually tried and convicted. In 1962, he was traded back to the Soviets for captured U.S. pilot Francis Gary Powers. That coin, barely heavier than normal, held a Cold War secret that unraveled one of the most famous spy swaps in history. It's now in a museum, and you can see it. Number 1. Fort Douaumont. Fort Douaumont was supposed to be impenetrable. Built high above the village of Douaumont in the late 1800s, it was the crown jewel of the French defensive line at Verdun. But by 1915, military leaders had lost faith in even the strongest forts. Believing it wouldn't withstand modern artillery, they stripped it of most of its defenses. That mistake cost them dearly. In February 1916, during the early days of the Battle of Verdun, a small German unit walked in unopposed and claimed it. No shots fired, no resistance. Just a silent takeover that stunned the French. What followed was one of the longest, bloodiest battles of the First World War. The fort was eventually recaptured in October of that same year, but not without massive casualties. Inside, Douaumont had everything: machine gun nests, ammunition rooms, and a maze of tunnels, all buried under thick concrete. Today the structure still stands, weathered, damaged, and quiet, holding the weight of one of history's most brutal chapters. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you pretty soon.